Some people are just difficult. But then there are those who seem carved from misery itself, whose very presence chills a room. At the ultra-exclusive restaurant, the Gilded Quill, that person was Nathaniel Sterling, a billionaire whose wealth was matched only by his cruelty. He was a storm every staff member prayed to avoid. For years they bowed, they scraped, they endured his verbal lashings in terrified silence. They called his corner booth the Dragon's Lair. But they didn't know that a storm of a different kind was coming. Her name was Amelia Vance, a new waitress with eyes that didn't know how to look away and a spirit that refused to break. This isn't just a story about a waitress and a billionaire. It's a story about the true cost of cruelty and the surprising power of a single person who dares to stand their ground. The Gilded Quill was a cathedral of modern gastronomy, a place where money whispered and ambition dined. Its patrons were the titans of industry, the quiet inheritors of dynastic fortunes, and the occasional political heavyweight. The staff moved with the synchronized grace of a ballet corps, their smiles polished, their service impeccable. Every fork was aligned with geometric precision, every glass was buffed to an ethereal shine. Yet beneath this veneer of perfect hospitality, a current of genuine fear ran through the veins of every employee. The source of this fear had a name, Nathaniel Sterling. He wasn't merely a regular, he was a ritual. Tuesday and Thursday evenings at precisely 7:00 p.m., his black Bentley, a silent predator of a car, would pull up to the curb. He would enter without a word to the doorman, his tailored suit a sheath of dark grey armor, his face a mask of cold indifference. He always sat at table 12, a secluded corner booth that offered a panoramic view of the dining room, while keeping him shrouded in a calculated penumbra of shadow. The staff had nicknamed it the Dragon's Lair. The rules for serving Nathaniel Sterling were unwritten, but known to all passed down from one generation of waitstaff to the next, like grim folklore. Rule 1, never initiate conversation. Rule 2, anticipate his needs before he voiced them, an impossible task, as his needs were fluid and designed to find fault. Rule 3, never under any circumstances make eye contact for more than a fleeting second. To meet his gaze was to invite a tirade that could curdle wine and end careers. Amelia Vance received this briefing on her third day. She was 24, with a quiet intensity that could be mistaken for timidity. It was a mistake people often made. She was working at the Gilded Quill to pay for her younger sister Chloe's mounting medical bills, a weight that settled in her bones, but never showed on her face. Her focus was a laser, her work ethic relentless. Gabriella, a veteran waitress with kind eyes and a permanently worried expression, pulled Amelia aside by the service station. "Listen, kid," she said, her voice a low, urgent murmur. "You're doing great, you're fast, you're smart, but I need to warn you about tonight. It's Tuesday." Amelia just nodded, polishing a wine glass. "Mr. Sterling," she said. She'd already heard the whispers. "It's not just that he's rude." Gabriella continued, glancing around nervously, as if the man himself might materialize from the steam of the espresso machine. "He's a void. He sucks the life out of you. Last month, he made young Finn cry because the ice in his water had supposedly lost its structural integrity. He complained to management that my smile was inauthentic, and it cost me a week's worth of top-section tables. Don't engage. Just be a ghost. Put the plate down, fill the water, and vanish." The restaurant's manager, a man named Mr. Finch, reinforced this doctrine of invisibility. He was a tall, thin man whose posture seemed to be a permanent bow. "Miss Vance," he said, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Regarding table 12 tonight, The rotation puts you on that section. However, given your novelty to our establishment, I would understand if you wished to cede the responsibility to Gabriella. I'm on the rotation, Mr. Finch. I can handle it, Amelia replied, her voice even. It wasn't bravado. It was a simple statement of fact. She had faced down exhausted doctors and condescending insurance agents. A rude customer, no matter how wealthy, seemed a manageable beast. Finch's Adam's apple bobbed. Very well. But be advised, any complaints from Mr. Sterling reflect not just on you, but on this entire institution. Perfection is not the goal. It is the bare minimum. At after office to this also 5 p.m., a hush fell over the staff. It was a palpable thing, a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure. The chatter by the kitchen door ceased. The buses moved with greater caution. At 7:00 p.m. on the dot, the heavy oak doors swung open. Nathaniel Sterling entered. He was perhaps in his late 40s, with hair the color of iron filings cut with military precision. His eyes, a startlingly pale blue, swept across the room with a dismissive air, cataloguing everything and valuing nothing. He moved with an unnerving stillness, his expensive shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. He didn't look at the hostess, who paled as he approached. He simply altered his trajectory toward table 12, knowing it would be ready. Amelia watched from her station, her heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. She saw the way the other patrons, powerful people in their own right, subtly avoided his gaze. She saw the way Mr. Finch's smile became a pained rictus. He wasn't just a customer. He was a sovereign of scorn in his own private kingdom. Taking a deep breath, Amelia picked up the specially designated water carafe for table 12, Voss chilled to exactly 4 degrees Celsius, with 2 lemon slices rind on, cut to a thickness of no more than 3 millimeters. She clutched her notepad and walked toward the dragon's lair. She felt the eyes of every other staff member on her back, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They were watching a lamb walk toward a wolf. But Amelia didn't feel like a lamb. She felt like a woman with a job to do and a sick sister to provide for. And for that, she would face any dragon. Amelia approached table 12 with a deliberate, unhurried pace. The air around the booth did seem cooler, heavier. Nathaniel Sterling was already seated, his attention fixed on a sleek tablet that lay flat on the table. He didn't acknowledge her presence as she came to a stop beside him. Following Gabriella's advice, she operated in near silence. She placed the small linen-wrapped bread basket on the table, followed by a small dish of imported olive oil. She then reached for the water glass, her movements economical and precise. As she poured the Voss water, her hand was perfectly steady. "Stop," a voice said, low and sharp as the crack of a whip. Amelia froze, the carafe hovering over the half-filled glass. He still hadn't looked up from his tablet. "Are you new?" He asked, the question an accusation. "Yes, sir. My name is Amelia. I'll be your server this evening," she said, her voice clear and calm. Amelia. He repeated the name, as if tasting something unpleasant. He finally lifted his head, and for the first time she was subjected to the full force of his gaze. His pale blue eyes were not just cold. They were analytical, dissecting her, searching for a flaw to exploit. The unwritten rule was to look away. Amelia did not. She met his gaze directly, her expression neutral. A flicker of something surprise annoyance passed over his features. "The lemon," he said, gesturing with a single manicured finger toward the carafe. "It's on the right side of the ice. It is meant to be on the left. The infusion is compromised when the pour carries it directly to the bottom of the glass. It should cascade over the ice. Do it again." It was a ludicrous, nonsensical complaint. It was a test. Amelia could feel the collective breath of the staff being held 20 yards away. She could almost hear Mr. Finch hyperventilating in his office. She simply gave a slight nod. "Of course, sir. My apologies." She didn't scurry away in shame. She calmly picked up the glass, and the carafe turned and walked back to the service station. She didn't slam anything down. She didn't sigh in exasperation. Finn, the young busboy, looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Just get another lemon slice." "He wants it done again," Amelia said quietly. She procured a new carafe, selected 2 new slices of lemon, and with the precision of a surgeon, used a long spoon to place the ice, and then the lemon slices exactly as he had, however, absurdly specified. When she returned, he was watching her, his tablet now dark. He watched her every move as she placed the new glass down and performed the pour. The water cascaded. He said nothing. "Are you ready to order, sir, or would you like a few more moments?" she asked. "I will have the seared scallops to start," he clipped. "They are to be seared for precisely 45 seconds on each side. Not 44, not 46. The pan must be cast iron, not stainless steel. And tell the chef if I taste anything other than clarified butter sea salt and the scallop itself, I will be sending it back." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "For my main, the filet mignon. Medium rare. And I want to be clear about what medium rare means to me, not to your chef. A deep red, warm center. Not pink, not cool. If he needs a meat thermometer, tell him he's in the wrong profession. It will be accompanied by the asparagus. Each spear should be uniform in thickness and blanched, not roasted." It was a speech designed to intimidate, to overwhelm. He was laying traps within traps. Amelia wrote down every word in her small notepad. "Understood, sir," she said, her pen making a small, crisp sound as she finished. 45 seconds per side, on the scallops cast iron only. Filet with a warm, deep red center. Uniform blanched asparagus. "Will you be having any wine this evening?" His lips thinned into a hard line. He was accustomed to flustered apologies and nervous trembling. He was not accustomed to calm competence. "The Chateau Margaux, 2005, he said, naming a wine that cost more than her monthly rent. "And it is to be decanted for exactly 1 hour before it is brought to the table. I trust you know how to do that without agitating the sediment." "Yes, sir, I do." She met his gaze again, holding it for a beat longer than was comfortable. "Your wine will be ready in an hour. I'll have the scallops out for you shortly." With another small nod, she turned and walked toward the kitchen. The moment she passed through the swinging doors, the tension broke. Is he insane?" gasped one of the line cooks. "What did he say?" Gabriella asked, rushing to her side. Amelia relayed the order word for word to the head chef, a fiery Frenchman named Antoine, who usually brooked no interference. But when it came to Sterling, even Antoine was subdued. He listened, his brow furrowed, and simply nodded. "Cast iron it is. Tell Finn to get me the vernier calipers. We will measure the asparagus." Mr. Finch appeared at her elbow, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. "Miss Vance." What was the issue with the water? The lemon placement was unsatisfactory, Mr. Finch. He stared at her, as if she were speaking another language. "The lemon placement. It's been rectified," she said, already turning to find the sommelier to begin the elaborate ritual for the Chateau Margaux. Throughout the meal, the dance continued. Amelia operated with a serene efficiency that seemed to unnerve Sterling more than any mistake could have. She was a calm sea against which his waves of contempt crashed and dissipated. The scallops arrived. He inspected them, cutting one in half with the edge of his fork. He ate it without comment. a silent victory. She served his fillet, placing it before him with a steady hand. He sliced into the center. The inside was a perfect warm red. He took a bite, chewed slowly, his eyes fixed on her. Amelia stood her ground a few feet away, her hands clasped behind her back, waiting for the verdict. He said nothing, which at his table was the equivalent of a standing ovation. He finished his meal, refusing dessert and coffee. The final bill was presented in a leather folio. He placed a black credit card inside without looking at the total. Amelia took it, processed the payment, and returned with the slip for him to sign. He scrawled a signature, then stood adjusting his suit jacket. As he prepared to leave, he paused, looking directly at her one last time. "You have a misplaced sense of confidence, Amelia," he said, his voice a low growl. "It will not serve you well here." "Thank you for your feedback, sir," she replied, her tone perfectly even. "Have a good evening." He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, then turned and swept out of the restaurant, leaving a wake of relieved silence behind him. Once he was gone, the staff descended upon her. "I can't believe it," Gabriella said, clutching her arm. "You survived. You actually survived." Finn looked at her with pure hero worship. He didn't yell once. Amelia just gave a small, tired smile. But her sense of relief was short-lived. As she went to clear the table, she picked up the leather folio containing the signed credit card slip. She glanced at the tip line, her breath caught in her throat. He had left her a $10,000 tip. It wasn't a reward. She knew with chilling certainty it was another test, a different kind of weapon. The $10,000 tip sent a shock wave through the gilded quill. Mr. Finch saw it first, his eyes bulging as he verified the signature on the slip. He scurried over to Amelia, who was standing by the point-of-sale system, holding the folio as if it might be radioactive. "Miss Vance, this is unprecedented." He stammered, his usual anxiety replaced by a greedy, sycophantic gleam. "Congratulations, truly. A testament to your impeccable service." Gabriella and the other servers crowded around their expressions, a mixture of awe and disbelief. $10,000. It was more than some of them made in 3 months. It was a life-altering sum for a single night's work. "What are you going to do with it?" Finn asked, his voice full of wonder. Amelia looked down at the bold, arrogant signature. She thought of Chloe's upcoming treatments of the specialist in Boston her doctor had recommended, but their insurance refused to cover. The money was a lifeline, a prayer answered in the most profane way possible. But it felt wrong. It felt tainted. It wasn't a gesture of appreciation. It was a power play. It was a purchase. He was trying to prove that everyone had a price, that her composure, her dignity could be bought and owned. He was trying to turn her into just another one of his assets. "I'm not accepting it," she said, her voice quiet but firm. A collective gasp went through the small crowd. Mr. Finch looked as if she had just slapped him. "Not accepting it. Miss Vance, that is absurd. It is your gratuity. You earned it." "No," she countered, shaking her head. "I earned my standard gratuity. This is something else. This is an insult. An insult," Finch squeaked, his voice rising in panic. "A $10,000 insult. He will be furious. He will think we have refused his generosity. He will never come back. Or worse, he will come back, and he will bring ruin upon us all." "I'll handle it," Amelia said. The decision had solidified in her mind, heavy and clear as lead. She took a pen, and on the restaurant's official stationery, she wrote a short, polite note. "Mr. Sterling, thank you, but I cannot accept your excessive gratuity. My service is included in the price of your meal, and while I appreciate the sentiment, my dignity is not for sale. Sincerely, Amelia Vance. She folded the note and placed it in an envelope, along with the voided credit card slip showing the tip had been removed. She handed it to Mr. Finch. Please have this messengered to Mr. Sterling's office tomorrow morning. Finch held the envelope as if it were a bomb. You are signing your own death warrant. He whispered, his face ashen. The next day, Wednesday, was thick with tension. Every time the phone rang, the staff jumped. Every time the front door opened, they expected to see Nathaniel Sterling, a thundercloud of fury ready to bring the restaurant to its knees. But he did not appear. Thursday arrived. The dread was a physical presence in the restaurant. Amelia went about her duties with her usual calm, but she could feel the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped the moment she drew near. She was a pariah, the woman who had prodded the dragon. At 6:45 p.m., the phone at the hostess stand rang. It was Sterling's assistant. He would be dining at 7:00 p.m. as usual, and he had a request. He wanted Amelia Vance to be his server. The news spread like wildfire. This was it, the public execution. Mr. Finch cornered her by the wine cellar, his face pleading. Just apologize, Miss Vance. Grovel if you must. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. I'll say you're new and didn't understand our policies. Please, for the love of God, just smooth this over. There is nothing to smooth over, Mr. Finch. I did my job and I refused an inappropriate tip, she said, pulling a bottle of Sancerre for another table. When Sterling arrived, he looked no different than he had on Tuesday. His expression was just as severe, his suit just as immaculate. He strode to table 12 and sat down. Amelia, taking a breath, approached. "Good evening, sir," she said, placing the water carafe on the table. This time, she made sure the lemon was on the left. He ignored her greeting. He didn't look at the menu. His pale eyes were fixed on her. "You have a degree in art history," he stated. It wasn't a question. Amelia was taken aback. Yes. From Columbia." How could he possibly know that? Had he run a background check on her? The thought was deeply unsettling. He gestured to a large abstract painting on the far wall, a chaotic swirl of blues and golds by a contemporary artist named Richard Pierce. "Tell me about that painting." This was a new test, a shift from the culinary to the academic. He was trying to find the limits of her competence to expose a weakness. "It's from Pierce's Nocturne series." Amelia began her voice, finding its familiar, steady rhythm. "It's called Insomnia in Cobalt. It's meant to be a visual representation of the fragmented, anxious thought patterns one experiences in the early hours of the morning. While it appears chaotic, there's actually a very rigid underlying structure based on the golden ratio. A lot of critics find it derivative of German expressionism, but I've always felt the use of gold leaf speaks more to a Klimt-esque influence, a search for beauty even in turmoil. She finished expecting a snide remark or a curt dismissal. Instead, a long silence stretched between them. He stared at the painting, then back at her. For the first time, his expression was not one of disdain, but of something she couldn't quite decipher. It was sharp assessing, but the overt hostility had momentarily receded. "An adequate analysis," he finally said, the words clipped. "Though you missed the influence of Japanese kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The beauty is not in the turmoil. It is in the repair after the turmoil." He was right. It was a brilliant observation she had never considered. "Thank you, sir," she said, a note of genuine respect in her voice. "That's a very insightful point." His eyes narrowed slightly, as if her sincerity was another unexpected move in their chess game. "I'll have the duck confit," he said, abruptly changing the subject, and the rest of the meal proceeded with his usual litany of impossible demands. The skin on the duck had to be a specific shade of mahogany. The sauce could not contain any trace of orange zest. But something had shifted. The tests felt less vicious, more perfunctory. He was going through the motions. Between his critiques of the food, he would interject random pointed questions. What is your opinion on the Stoic philosophers? Do you believe altruism is a genuine human trait or merely a transactional performance for social gain? Amelia answered each question thoughtfully and honestly, refusing to be flustered. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a debater, a scholar, an equal in a bizarre intellectual duel. She found herself against all odds, almost enjoying the challenge. She was so focused on their strange verbal sparring that she didn't notice the restaurant had grown quiet around them, the other patrons and staff watching the strange, intense rapport unfolding at table 12. He left no tip that night. Not a single dollar. And to Amelia, that felt more like a victory than $10,000 ever could. It was a sign of begrudging respect. He was no longer trying to buy her. He was trying to understand her, and that she realized might be far more dangerous. The dynamic between Amelia and Nathaniel Sterling became the new strange normal at the Gilded Quill. Their twice-weekly encounters evolved into a ritual of culinary demands interwoven with intellectual combat. He would quiz her on architectural theory, the history of finance Italian opera. She would parry every question with a quiet confidence that continued to baffle him. The staff no longer saw her as a lamb walking toward a wolf, but as some kind of dragon tamer, a whisperer who could navigate the billionaire's mercurial temper without getting burned. Amelia found herself looking at him differently too. Beneath the layers of calculated cruelty, she began to see glimpses of a profound, aching loneliness. He wasn't just a rude man. He was a man encased in a fortress of his own making, and his insults were the arrows he fired from the ramparts to keep everyone at bay. She didn't pity him, but she began to understand him as a complex, wounded creature rather than a simple monster. One Tuesday evening, about a month into this strange arrangement, Amelia was more distracted than usual. Chloe had had a bad day. A new experimental treatment had been proposed, promising but terrifyingly expensive. The phone call with the insurance company before her shift had been a soul-crushing exercise in bureaucratic indifference. The weight of it all was pressing down on her, and for the first time, her composure was a fragile shell. She was taking Sterling's order when her phone, which she had forgotten to switch to silent, buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a text from her sister. Sterling's eyes flickered down to her pocket with immediate, sharp disapproval. "My apologies, sir," Amelia said, her voice tighter than usual. "It won't happen again. Personal matters should be left at the door," he said coldly. "This establishment requires one's full attention." "You're right, sir," she murmured, her mind a million miles away, thinking of Chloe alone in her small apartment. Later in the evening, needing a moment, Amelia stepped into a small alcove near the restrooms to call her sister back. She kept her voice low, but the acoustics of the hallway carried her words further than she realized. "Hey, Chloe, how are you feeling? No, don't you dare be sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. We'll figure it out. We always do. The Boston doctor. Yes, I know the cost. I'll pick up more shifts. Maybe that little bookstore downtown is hiring too. We will find the money. You just focus on resting. I love you too. More than anything." She hung up, pressing her fingers to her eyes for a brief second to ward off the sting of tears, before schooling her features back into a mask of professional calm. When she turned to leave the alcove, she saw him. Nathaniel Sterling was standing 20 feet down the hall, ostensibly examining a painting, but his posture was rigid. He had heard. She knew with absolute certainty that he had heard every word. A cold dread washed over her. She had exposed a vulnerability, a weakness. She expected him to use it to mock her financial struggles, to make some callous remark about her personal life infringing on his dining experience. She braced herself as she walked back toward his table. But he said nothing. He was unnervingly silent for the rest of the meal. He didn't ask her about philosophy or art. He didn't complain about his food. He just watched her, his pale blue eyes holding a new, unsettling intensity. The silence was worse than the insults. It was heavy with unspoken thoughts, and it made the hairs on Amelia's arms stand up. When he was finished, he paid his bill again, no tip, and rose to leave. As he passed her, he paused. Amelia wore a simple silver locket around her neck every day. It had been a gift from her parents before they died, and held a tiny picture of her and Chloe as children. It was her most precious possession. Sterling's eyes fixed on it. That's a rather sentimental piece of jewelry for a place like this. He said, his voice devoid of any warmth. It's cheap. It detracts from the uniform. The criticism was so unexpected, so deeply personal, that it struck her with the force of a physical blow. He hadn't attacked her work. He hadn't attacked her intellect. He had attacked the one thing that symbolized her love for her sister, the very reason she endured all of this. He had taken the vulnerability he'd discovered and twisted the knife with surgical precision. Something inside Amelia, a dam of carefully constructed patience and professionalism that had held for weeks, finally broke. She took a small step forward, her eyes for the first time, flashing not with calm neutrality, but with a hot, righteous anger. "This locket," she said, her voice, low and trembling with controlled fury, "is worth more than your car, your suit, and every bottle of wine in your cellar combined. Not in money, in meaning, something you clearly know nothing about." Mr. Finch, who had been hovering nearby, turned a shade of grey. The air crackled. "You come in here twice a week," Amelia continued, her voice gaining strength, "and you terrorize the staff. You make impossible demands, and you belittle people who are just trying to earn a living. For weeks I thought you were just a bully, or maybe just incredibly particular. But I was wrong. This—" she touched her locket. "This was different. That was just cruel for the sake of being cruel." She finally looked him straight in the eye, all rules and pretenses forgotten. "You know, I used to feel a little bit sorry for you. I thought you must be the loneliest man in the world. But now I see the truth. You're not just a rude billionaire, Mr. Sterling. You're a coward. You hide behind your money, and you use it to inflict pain on others because you're too afraid to feel anything yourself. You're a sad, empty man who thinks wealth gives him the right to be cruel, and that is the most pathetic kind of poverty I have ever seen." The dining room had fallen utterly silent. You could hear the fizz of champagne in a glass from across the room. Nathaniel Sterling stood, frozen his face, a blank mask, but his pale eyes were wide with shock. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not his board of directors, not his rivals, not anyone. Amelia held his gaze, her chest heaving, the adrenaline of her outburst coursing through her. She had done it. She had said the unsayable. She knew without a doubt that she was fired. Without another word, Sterling turned on his heel and walked out of the restaurant. He didn't look back. Mr. Finch rushed toward her, his face a mess of terror and rage. "Vance! My office now." Amelia met his furious gaze with a strange sense of peace. She had lost her job, but she hadn't lost herself, and as she followed him toward his office, she felt for the first time, in a long time, completely and utterly free. Amelia sat in Mr. Finch's office, a small, cluttered room that smelled of lemon polish and fear. She didn't wait for him to speak. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the corner of his mahogany desk. "There's no need for a long conversation, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice calm, despite the adrenaline still singing in her veins. "I understand the consequences of my actions. Thank you for the opportunity." Finch stared at the folded apron as if it were a lit explosive. He opened his mouth, then closed it, sputtering like a car engine, failing to turn over. "Consequences? Miss Vance, consequences does not even begin to describe the magnitude of this catastrophe. You didn't just break a dish. You insulted the man who holds the fate of this restaurant in the palm of his hand. He could buy this building and have it torn down for sport. I am ruined. He attacked me personally," Amelia said, not as an excuse, but as a simple fact. "There is a line. He crossed it. There are no lines with men like Nathaniel Sterling," Finch wailed, running his hands through his thinning hair. "There is only what he wants, and what he gets, pack your things. You're finished." Amelia nodded. She had expected as much. She stood up, gave him a final polite nod, and walked out of the office. The locker room was silent as she changed out of her uniform. Gabriella caught her by the exit, her eyes full of a sad admiration. "I've wanted to say that to him for 5 years," the older waitress whispered, pressing a $100 bill into Amelia's hand. "Don't you dare refuse it. You're the bravest person I've ever met." Amelia's eyes welled up, and she hugged Gabriella tightly before walking out into the cool night air, jobless but unbowed. The next 2 days were a blur of anxiety. Amelia scoured online job boards, applied for every serving position she could find, and tried to shield Chloe from her worry. Wednesday passed with no word. Thursday, the day Sterling was due back at the Gilded Quill, dawned with a sense of impending doom. Amelia imagined him returning, finding her gone, and still taking his anger out on the rest of the staff. The thought made her sick with guilt. At around 3:00 p.m. on Thursday, her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Peeking through the peephole, she saw a woman she didn't recognize. She was in her 50s, with elegantly styled silver hair and a charcoal grey business suit that looked more expensive than Amelia's entire wardrobe. She held a leather portfolio. Cautiously, Amelia opened the door. "Amelia Vance?" the woman asked. Her voice was crisp and professional, with no discernible accent. "Yes." "My name is Catherine Albright. I am Mr. Sterling's executive assistant." The woman said, her expression unreadable. Amelia's stomach plummeted. This was it. He had sent his legal counsel. A cease and desist, a lawsuit for slander. "May I come in for a moment?" Ms. Albright asked. It was phrased as a question, but it felt like a command. Amelia stepped back, allowing the woman into her small, clean apartment. Ms. Albright's eyes did a quick, subtle scan of the room, taking in the worn but comfortable furniture, the stacks of art history books, and the framed photo of Amelia and a smiling Chloe on the mantelpiece. "I will not take up much of your time." Ms. Albright began, getting straight to the point. "I am here on behalf of Mr. Sterling. Firstly, he has instructed me to deliver this." She opened her portfolio and handed Amelia a thick, cream-colored envelope. Amelia's name was written on the front in sharp black ink. Hesitantly, she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cardstock. The note was brief and handwritten. "Miss Vance, your assessment of my character was both accurate and overdue. The comments I made regarding your personal effects were inexcusable. I offer you my sincerest apology. N.S." Amelia read the note twice, her mind reeling. An apology. From Nathaniel Sterling. It was the last thing on earth she had expected. She looked up at Miss Albright, speechless. "Secondly, The assistant continued her tone, as businesslike as ever. Mr. Sterling became aware of your sister's medical situation. She didn't say how. She didn't need to. He has instructed his philanthropic division, the Alara Foundation, to reach out to Massachusetts General Hospital. He wants to fully fund the proposed treatment from the specialist in Boston. This would be handled as an anonymous grant through the foundation. Your sister would never know the source of the funds. There would be no paperwork for you, no strings attached, no further contact required. Amelia sank onto the arm of her sofa, the apology note still clutched in her hand. Her mind was a whirlwind of suspicion shock and a desperate rising tide of hope. It was too much. A trick. Another test. "Why?" Amelia whispered, looking up at the impeccably dressed woman. Why would he do this? Ms. Albright's professional veneer seemed to soften for just a fraction of a second. A hint of something sadness, perhaps, flickered in her eyes. The Alara Foundation is very important to Mr. Sterling. It is named for his late wife. It specializes in funding research and treatment for rare genetic disorders. She paused, letting the information settle. Mr. Sterling does not make gestures like this lightly. In my 15 years of service, I have never known him to apologize to anyone. Nor have I seen him take such a direct, personal interest in a foundation case. She placed a business card on the small coffee table. It listed a direct line to the head of the Alara Foundation. "The offer is real, Miss Vance. The decision is yours. All you have to do is make the call." Ms. Albright gave a curt, professional nod. "Oh, and one more thing. Mr. Finch from the Gilded Quill called our office this morning to inquire if Mr. Sterling would be dining tonight. I was instructed to inform him that Mr. Sterling will not be returning to his restaurant unless you are reinstated, with a raise. And Mr. Finch is to give you a formal apology for his unprofessional behavior." With that, Catherine Albright turned and let herself out, leaving Amelia alone in her silent apartment, holding an apology from an impossible man and an offer that could save her sister's life. The world had just been turned completely upside down. For 2 days, Amelia felt like she was living in a dream. She hadn't called the foundation. She hadn't called Mr. Finch, though he had left 3 increasingly frantic and sycophantic voicemails on her phone. The apology note from Sterling sat on her mantelpiece, a bizarre artifact from another reality. His offer hung in the air, a shimmering mirage of hope and suspicion. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was all part of an elaborate, cruel game. She needed to understand. She needed to look him in the eye and hear it from him. Taking a breath, she called Miss Albright's office number, a number reserved for the highest echelons of the corporate world. Miss Albright's office. "This is Amelia Vance. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling." She said, her voice more confident than she felt. There was a pause. She expected to be shut down, told he was unavailable. Instead, the assistant said, "1 moment." A few seconds later, his voice came on the line. It was the same low, sharp tone, but without the usual edge of contempt. "Miss Vance." "Mr. Sterling," she began, gripping the phone tightly. "I received your messages from Ms. Albright and your note, and I want to meet to talk about this in person." Another pause. "The Gilded Quill is no longer an option," he said. "I agree. Somewhere neutral. The atrium at the Museum of Modern Art, tomorrow at 10 a.m. She chose it deliberately. It was public, a place of light and culture, the antithesis of the shadowed corner booth where their strange story had begun. "I will be there," he said, and the line went dead. The next morning, Amelia found him standing, not in the bustling main atrium, but in a quieter gallery on the 2nd floor, in front of a vast, contemplative, Mark Rothko painting all deep maroons and shadowy blacks. He wasn't wearing his usual corporate armor. Instead, he was dressed in simple dark trousers and a grey cashmere sweater. Without the severe suit, he looked smaller, more human. He looked tired. "Miss Vance," he said, nodding to her as she approached. He didn't look at her, but at the painting. They say his later works are like doorways into the abyss, a confrontation with mortality. "I think they're about what comes after," Amelia countered quietly. "The quiet after the storm. The feeling of being submerged in something so vast, you lose the edges of yourself." He finally turned to look at her, his pale eyes searching her face. "I owe you more than a written apology," he said. "What you said to me, no one has had the courage or the insight to say it in a very long time. You were right. I was a coward." The admission was so direct, so raw, it left her momentarily speechless. "The money for your sister's treatment," she said, finding her voice. "Why?" He turned back to the Rothko. "The Elara Foundation, as Ms. Albright told you, is named for my wife." He spoke the name Elara softly, as if it were a fragile, precious thing. She was an artist, a painter. Much more talented than Pierce, she saw beauty everywhere. In the chaos of the city, in the face of a stranger. She was the one who taught me about kintsugi. She said that people were like that too. That our scars and our repairs are what make us beautiful. He fell silent for a long moment, lost in a memory Amelia could not see. 10 years ago, she was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. Vasculitis. It's progressive, unpredictable. We had the best doctors, the best care money could buy. I flew specialists in from around the world. I built entire research wings at hospitals. I poured hundreds of millions of dollars into finding a cure. I thought my wealth, my power could bend the world to my will. I thought I could buy her more time. His voice grew thick with a grief that was still shockingly raw. But I couldn't. It didn't matter how many checks I wrote or how many important people I called. The disease did what it was going to do. Elara died 5 years ago. In the end, all my money was just useless paper. He finally looked at Amelia, and for the first time, she saw not a cold tyrant, but a man utterly broken by loss. After she was gone, the world lost its color. Kindness felt like a lie. People were always wanting something, smiling at me for my money. My power became a shield. I used it to keep everyone away so I wouldn't have to feel anything. The Gilded Quill. It was one of our places. We sat at that table a week before her final hospitalization. My routine there, my ridiculous demands. It was a twisted, pathetic way of trying to hold on to her. A way of recreating a moment that was gone forever and punishing the world for letting her slip away. It all clicked into place. The cruelty, the tests, the loneliness. It was a fortress built around a hollowed-out heart. "The night I overheard you on the phone with your sister," he continued, "I heard in your voice the same desperation I felt for years. But I also heard a love and a strength that my money could never buy. When you stood up to me, when you refused my tip, when you defended your locket, you reminded me of Elara. She had that same fire, that same unshakable sense of her own worth." He took a shaky breath. "My cruelty to you about the locket, that was my defense mechanism kicking in. Because you, a stranger, a waitress, showed me a strength I had lost. You made me feel something, and it terrified me. What you said, it was the truth, and it was like a slap in the face that I desperately needed." He looked at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. "The offer for your sister is not charity, Miss Vance. And it is not me trying to buy you. It's penance. It's a chance to use this useless paper to do the one thing I couldn't do for my own wife. My foundation exists for this very reason, to help where I failed. Your sister has the same rare form of vasculitis that Ilara had." Amelia stared at him, the final piece of the puzzle locking into place. It wasn't just a random act of generosity. It was a deeply personal crusade. He wasn't just offering to save Chloe, he was trying to save himself. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, tears of relief for her sister, and tears of a profound, unexpected empathy for this broken man. In this quiet gallery, surrounded by art that spoke of turmoil and peace, the billionaire and the waitress were gone. There were only two people left, bound by a shared understanding of grief-love and the quiet dignity of the human heart. Amelia made the call. The grant from the Ilara Foundation was processed with quiet, stunning efficiency. Within a week, Chloe had an appointment in Boston with Dr. Aris Thorne, the world's leading expert on her condition. For the first time in years, the future felt not like a dark tunnel, but like an open road. She also accepted her job back at the Gilded Quill. Mr. Finch met her at the door, his face a mask of profound contrition. He apologized profusely, gave her a significant raise, and assigned her to the restaurant's most coveted section, far from the shadows of Table 12. The entire staff treated her with a newfound reverence, as if she had returned from a heroic quest. The first Tuesday after her return, a nervous energy filled the restaurant. No one knew if he would show up. But at 7:00 p.m., the black Bentley pulled up as usual. Nathaniel Sterling walked in. He looked different. The hard, defensive lines around his eyes seemed softer. He nodded to the hostess, and to everyone's astonishment, addressed her by name. "Good evening, Sarah." Sarah nearly dropped her stack of menus. He was seated not at his usual table, but at a small table for two in the center of the room. Amelia was his server. It was his request. "Good evening, Amelia," he said, his voice quiet. He didn't call her Miss Vance. "Good evening, Nathaniel," she replied, a small, genuine smile on her face. She didn't call him Mr. Sterling. The meal was unlike any before it. He ordered simply without a single modification or impossible demand. He asked her how Chloe was doing, and he listened, truly listened to her answer. He told her a story about Ilara's disastrous first attempt at pottery, a story that made him smile, a sad, distant smile. Their conversation was easy, natural. They talked about the Rothko painting, about their shared love for the city's hidden architectural gems, about the simple pleasure of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. He was still a reserved man, a man who wore his grief like a well-tailored coat, but the cruelty was gone. The sneering disdain had been replaced by a quiet, watchful respect. He began to change in other ways too. He learned the names of the other staff members. He complimented Chef Antoine on a perfectly cooked piece of fish, a compliment that nearly gave the fiery Frenchman a heart attack. He left a standard, generous 20% tip on every bill. Table 12. The Dragon's Lair was eventually given to other patrons. Its dark legend slowly faded, replaced by the new, unbelievable reality of a changed man. Amelia and Nathaniel's relationship settled into a comfortable platonic friendship. It was not a romance. It was something rarer and perhaps more profound. It was a connection forged in conflict and tempered by mutual respect. He was her patron, her friend, a man she had, in a strange way, helped to save from himself. And she was the woman who had seen past the monster, to the man, the waitress, who had refused to be broken, and in doing so, had pieced a broken man back together. Several months later, Chloe was in remission, her laughter, once again filling Amelia's small apartment. Amelia had been promoted to assistant manager, at the Gilded Quill, her keen eye and steady demeanor making her a natural leader. One evening, Nathaniel was her last customer. As the restaurant emptied out, they sat in the quiet dining room, sharing a pot of tea. "You know," Nathaniel said, looking around the room, "I used to see this place as a mausoleum, a monument to a memory." "And now?" Amelia asked. He looked at her, a genuine warmth in his pale blue eyes. "Now," he said, "it just feels like a restaurant, a place for new beginnings." Amelia smiled. The storm had passed. The dragon was gone. In his place sat a man, humbled by grief, redeemed by a single act of courage. And she was no longer just a waitress, but a testament to the quiet power of dignity, proving that sometimes the strongest person in the room isn't the one with all the money, but the one who knows their own worth. This was more than a story of a waitress and a billionaire. It was a powerful reminder that behind every difficult person, there is often a story of deep pain. Nathaniel Sterling built a fortress of rudeness to protect a broken heart, but it was Amelia Vance's unshakable dignity that finally breached its walls. She didn't fight his anger with more anger. She met it with calm, unwavering self-respect. Her courage didn't just win her a battle, it helped a man find his way back to his own humanity. It reminds us that empathy isn't about excusing bad behavior, but about understanding its roots. True strength isn't about how loud you can shout, but about how firmly you can stand in your own truth. What did you think of Amelia's incredible courage? Have you ever witnessed a moment where one person's bravery changed everything? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire and make you think. Thank you for listening.